welcome to the Death and All the Rest podcast, where we talk about life, death, and everything in between.
Hi, Bree.
Hey, Chris.
We're winging this.
We're winging it. We're trying something new. We
And
have
then
so much like stream of consciousness
that's right.
thinking that always happens before we start recording. And we feel like we have some really good content that comes out of that. And we miss it all the time. So we're just trying something new.
Yeah, like stream of consciousness. That's came out of the 1920s with Virginia Woolf and James Joyce and other writers who actually like came up with the idea that like human thought is just like a series of run-on sentences. It just connects and branches forever. So there's this theory now that like we didn't used to think as complexly as we did, but we were still anatomically modern human beings.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard about that?
No.
There's all kinds of bizarre because the hardest thing about of all this is we have no record of the human brain because the human brain deteriorates super fast, right? So
Mhm.
there's no fossils. We have fossils of bones in our DNA, but no record of like what the brain was. So
Yeah.
and people are trying to figure out like why we do the things that we do. And this guy wrote this book in the 70s called Bifurcation of the Human Brain. And his argument was that the two hemispheres weren't as divided as they are now. They were they were almost one, or he actually has two theories, I think. Um, they were more divided and they weren't as connected.
Hmm.
And so you're like your ego and your super ego potentially could be like feel much more separate inside you. So like sometimes you would hear the voice of your ego as like a as disembodied voice, but inside your own head. And that's
Mhm.
where our concept of like God came from. Because you actually hear like this voice in your head telling you to do something. That's highly speculative. I don't
It's
know.
interesting too, because I mean, it goes with that idea of like, people talk about like the angel and the devil, and they're saying different
Exactly.
things, right? And it's like, yeah, I wonder also if that's kind of where this idea of like a conscience grew from.
Yeah.
Like that, we hear this voice that exists within ourselves, and it tells us, right and wrong and the moral compass and all of that. But it sounds like this could kind of go in line with these theories that he's talking about these sides being more separate
hmm
than we realize, and that it almost sounds foreign when different
Yeah.
ones are talking,
They were
different
like
sides are
these
talking.
entirely separate structures composed of like our consciousness, and they just weren't communicating as well as they do now over like history, evolution.
That's that's an interesting concept, because we talk about, collectively as society, we talk about evolution, human evolution, but not a lot of times evolution of brain function and
hmm
brain development, and how that like, there's these different things about like more m- uh m- more civilized living and social constructs that develop and all this stuff, but like, language, all of that, but not this idea as much of our brains evolving, which makes sense because like we've created over time, we created these like um social structures where there's need a lot of time for higher level cognitive functioning. We have to be able to problem solve in higher ways. And this goes in with like the advancement in tech too, right? Like there's this connection to that where like it was simpler times when there wasn't all of this access and this flow of information and this development constantly happening, and so there wasn't as much need for higher level cognitive functioning. Problem solving was not, I don't want to say simpler. I don't want to like
No,
invalidate,
no.
like when you're thinking in like, when agriculture was like the big
Yeah.
way that society functioned, the problem solving was trying to figure out how to manage your crops and how to farm your crops most effectively and deal with your animals and all of that. And now it's like these other very nuanced things that like aren't as innately survival skill
Mm.
based. They're different. They're like in this different level that we have to tap into in our brains.
Yeah. Or like they're outgrowths of that. And and what are
Yeah.
the second order effects of like having to think like that? Is that where
Yeah.
how we've gotten neurotic, you know?
It's funny because I teach this to the clients that I work with, and I do a webinar about this, but, like, it's around this idea of, like, burnout and overfunctioning and high productivity and stuff, but I talk about the effects of cortisol, and I
Mhm,
go into, like, all the specifics around the 6 different systems in our body, but I also talk about the cognitive effect, our actual brain, how it responds to cortisol, and what's interesting is when we have high levels of cortisol, so high levels of stress creating cortisol, our brain does this thing where it defaults to survival mode
mhm,
and prioritizing the use of survival mechanisms to keep us alive because it
mhm,
recognizes that we're in high state of stress and that's what its reserves its bandwidth is low, so it's just trying to do the things that are most important. But what I talk about a lot is what people tend to do specifically in society today and specifically the people who are the high functioners who just are go 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 productive all the time, they are stretching that even thinner because the resources are already spread thin in our brain. That's why it's prioritizing and putting them where they need to go, most
mm,
importantly. And then they are forcing so higher cognitive functioning is typically not accessible to us in those moments. But then people have learned this like evolution of that is people have learned to tap into that higher level functioning still because they have to get shit done the way that they're used to. So they're spreading it even more thinly and have even less brain power in those moments. And then also just something that I think is worth noting with the effect of cortisol cognitively is cortisol depletes our serotonin levels,
mm,
and serotonin is our natural feel good chemical that's a mood stabilizer. So when we have less serotonin in our brain, we are more prone to anxiety and depression and other negative emotions.
mhm,
Cortisol depletes serotonin. So we're already compromised. And then we are stressing our system. We are forcing our brain to move outside of its survival mode to do higher level functioning, further depleting what our brain has available to it. And it's this cycle, right? And then we say
yeah,
suck, and then we wonder why we're all so fucking burnt out all the time.
sure. It's that is the life hack, right? Like, you're like you've tricked yourself, not, like, intentionally, but you're somehow using that, that survival mechanism to motivate you to continue to work cerebral,
Yeah.
right? Something like that. And, that that sounds painful. That sounds painful. Or you get people
Yeah.
like me where I check out,
Hmm.
but that's also, and my intellect goes offline, but that's also a survival mechanism. Like, I have the ability to just, like, not care, you know? And
Yeah.
because I'm not caring, I'm not stressed out. I
Well, your
could just
brain is actually, it sounds like your brain is doing what it's intended to do. When your brain defaults to too much stress, high cortisol, survival mechanisms, and you go, heard, right? Subconsciously, you're not actively thinking that, but like when you just stop giving a fuck and you're like shutting down in that way, you're doing what your brain is trying to tell you to do. You're listening to the signal because your
sure.
brain is like, we're done, we're done.
But it also comes at a cost because I'm not handling the tasks that need to be handled, and
There's a
those affect
Go
my
ahead.
those affect my bottom line.
There's a huge discrepancy, and this is something I think, like, you're speaking to the evolution of the brain, we're talking about the evolution of society, but this is that, right? Because
Yeah,
there's this natural, organic way our brain is set to function, and yours does that. Yours is one of the brains that is like, "Okay, I'm listening, I'm paying attention, I'm gonna shut it off." Society doesn't allow for that. And that's kind of this issue that we talked about this in the grief episodes with the guests that we've had, but this idea that like you need to be producing, you need to be
yes,
met at this level, there's this expectation of you, and society sets us up in this way like where what is expected of us at this point in time in culture is not what is innately what happens, our process and what we need. There's not a lot of room for the actual human condition in the expectations and standards that have come to unfold in the development of civilization, and that's a lot of discrepancy, cognitive dissonance there,
Mm-hmm.
juxtaposition, like, how so it's this choice, it's this forced choice for a lot of us because we can't even help how our brains respond a lot of time without conscious effort. We can do that, but it takes conscious effort. But, like, for you, it's this case of, I'm listening to my brain and I'm shutting down the functioning until I'm ready to do more, but now I'm missing the mark on this shit that has to get done.
Mm-hmm.
For these other people, I'm one of other people, it's this, I keep functioning. I keep fucking doing what I gotta do. It's gotta get done. I'm forcing my brain to spread itself way too thin. And now I'm exhausted.
Yeah. You can't turn it off.
Can't turn it off.
You
And
want
now
to,
I'm
you want
sick.
to, so you can't sleep. So you can't rest.
Yeah. And that's where, like, inflammation comes in and
Mhm.
immune system gets
More
compromised. And
cortisol.
there's all these different, yeah, more cortisol. Cortisol, it affects six systems in our bodies that like people don't realize. Reproductive system, think about that, like our reproductive system,
Yeah.
respiratory system, cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal system. Um, I'm trying to think of the other two off the top of my head. Immune system,
Yeah.
and there's one more that I can't think of, but that's large. Like that's everything, right? So there's high cortisol. We're stressed. We're putting ourselves in a state where we're not recuperating from stress. So yeah, you're getting sick. Yeah, all of a sudden you like my asthma. Direct correlation to my stress. It is a
Yeah.
pre-existing medical condition, but it does get worse, and like people can get upper respiratory infections when they have acute stress happen. They can, if they have COPD, if they have asthma, it gets worse. There's like all this stuff, and physiologically that happens. That there is a tightening to our throat. There's mucus secretion that happens with stress, and all of that stuff
Mm.
makes us worse. When you have joint pain, headaches, all of that, right? That's muscle tension,
Yeah.
that's joint tension. That stress does that to our bodies. And we
Mm.
live in this state where we have to do or we have to stop.
Yeah.
And we're going against our natural inclination
It
when
feels,
or we're going, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Like we talk, like this actually goes to um, what we talked about a lot, not us, but I mean society about
yeah,
work-life balance, you
yeah,
know? But it's much more, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more complexity and nuance. Like, we're not talking about work-life balance. We're talking about your internal systems balance, you know?
yeah,
Status quo or whatever, homeostasis. Homeostasis is all the systems working together optimally
yeah,
at the same, and that takes a lot. And
yep.
we're breaking that apart. So that was one thing. And then I've been studying a lot of bodybuilding stuff these days because I just love physical fitness. And I was
Hmm.
strength training breaks down to stimulus, recovery, adaptation.
Hmm.
And the stimulus is stress from working, from physical labor. Say we're just keeping it purely on strength training, and you
Okay.
exceeding uh your your limitations, just pushing it just a little bit, and then you get that cortisol from that, and then we have the recovery stage, and then during the recovery stage and coming out of it, your body adapts
Hmm.
to handle that stress load, that increased stress load. You just go increase your capacity just a tiny little bit, whether it's muscular
Yeah.
development, neurological development, mind body connection, a bunch of different things.
Hmm.
So, what if we're hijacking that system to rewrite our brain, and if it gets out of control, and like we're not doing it because we're not doing it consciously. We're
Hmm.
doing it because we're trying to survive in our environment, in our society. Um, that's a fascinating subject,
Yeah.
generationally.
Yeah. That's the important part of this too, is like most of us, whatever our default setting is and how we respond to stress, whether you listen to your brain saying like, bring it down, or you don't, that comes from a place of conditioning, of modeling, of what we've learned of our own methods of coping for survival, right? Like a lot of times that starts in our family of origin, our experience throughout the lifetime, different relationships that we have over the lifetime. Like this is automatic, but learned and how we respond to that. So it's not like I think that's important for people to hear listening to this because people are going to resonate. They're responding one way or the other. But also this is not a conscious choice that most of us are making. There's a certain point where we bring some insight to this and say like
Mhm.
try to recognize for ourselves what we're doing and try to recognize how we can live in this way where we're trying to find the balance of giving our the biological needs that we have in a moment of high stress, but also still recognizing that we live in a society where the demand doesn't stop and we have to be able to do that. But like those are the moments where realistically in this time that we live in, that's where we put the reserves on as much as we can. We function as minimally as we can for productivity because there
Mhm.
still is demand. There's still stuff that has to get done. We have to meet, but as minimally as we can until the rest gets back online. And we've said this part a million times, but it bears repeating because it's the most important element. Self care. Self
Mhm.
care is the way to allow your brain to be able to come back online and do the higher level functioning so, like, it's counterintuitive to a lot of people because when we're stressed, we're exhausted, there's not a lot to give. And when we're trying to do this higher level functioning for the stuff that has to get done, we're just feeling like that's the important thing to prioritize.
Mhm.
But the reminder is what actually has to be prioritized is your self care because that's the thing that's going to refuel the system, empty out the spoons as far as spoon theory goes, or give you more spoons to spread the volume across at least so that you can function. That is where that's our best entry point for balance.
Yeah. You have to take care of the body,
Yeah.
the health of the body in the very basic nurturing ways. And that'll
Mhm.
help you deal with the rest no matter what it is because it's so complex we don't know where to meet
Yep.
and your life is your life and you have like I can tell you to like you need to rest more, but you're like, motherfucker, I got 5 kids to feed, bitch. And I
Yeah.
can't get out
Can't
of
do
this
that.
environment. Yeah. I'm like, you're probably right, bro. Give yourself some moments to meditate. Try
Mhm.
and eat a little bit better. Prioritize your sleep. Maybe put down the beer because you think it's helping you decompress, but it's actually not helping you decompress. It's tiring you out more.
Yep.
And you have to decide that for yourself, right?
Yeah.
What it is. I think about this like story from my dad that I remember interaction with him from when I was a little kid,
Mhm.
or young, 10, 12, 15, something, somewhere around there. And I was helping him do something in the backyard with concrete, laying concrete or something like that. And I was
Mhm.
sitting down working on it. And he's like, when you're working on something, you never sit down ever. Unless it's at a desk. He's like, you fit I mean, physically. He's like,
Mhm.
stand or squat. He's like, because that'll keep you working and keep you getting it done.
Mhm.
And I was like, that makes a kind of sense to me. You're staying in
Mhm.
that physical zone. You're staying moving.
Body emotion stays in motion.
Yeah, but you're also working harder too,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
It's just like two different viewpoints on that. I think he was right. It's like also this is a man who has worked his ass off his entire life. Yeah. So, yeah, you said it though. Object in motion tends to stay in motion. Um, was that Rolling Stone gathers no moss, But then you have to keep moving.
It's funny because, like, that is true. We know that about momentum in bodies, right? Like, we keep them moving and they stay moving. The more energy we have to use, the more energy our body creates. Like, that is fact. My husband is a very physical labor job, intensive job. My husband is he has a manual labor job. But, like, he we the other day, it was very hot the first 2 days this week, like 96 degrees, and he was
Mm,
outside in the sun. And the first day he came home Monday, and he was saying he felt like shit, basically. He had nothing in him, and, I asked this has been a long time of supporting him and healthy habit building. We support each other in this because accountability, and neither one of us is good at it on our own necessarily.
mm,
But, like, I said, "Did you eat?" and he had meal prepped his entire week. He had a high protein source, then he had another high protein that was egg salad that he made. It was
Huh?
great. So he ate, and I said, "Did you drink any water?" He said, "I did. I drank my big 32-ounce bottle of water, and then I had 2 other bottles of water." And, but, the fact is he still is exerting a lot of energy, and he's in the sun, he's sweating, he needs more water intake than that, and he said that. And also I was like, "And you, need to take breaks." Like, you can't just keep plugging through because your body needs some moments to rest and to step out of the sun, out of the heat. Like,
Uh,
he got home and his skin was hot because he'd been in the heat, like, it was like he was, like, cooking. And I was
yeah,
like,
because he
you gotta
was.
carve out some breaks every so often, like, just every 5 minutes, every hour or something, just step out of the sun and stand in the shade for 5 minutes, something.
And was he wearing a hat?
Yeah, a ball cap. He always wears one at work.
You should be wearing a sun hat like I do. I think about this a lot.
He
But
will not wear a sun hat. Like, I just know that.
I know, but, like, what you're talking about, like, that sun exposure,
Yeah,
like, saying he's cooked, that's
yeah,
inflammation. That's
yeah.
literally what it is. So and that wears you the fuck out. I'm very pale. I'm Norwegian and Irish. Um, I my grandfather died of skin cancer, and he was my hero. I don't want that to happen to me. I was super conscious, and I have been since I was like 13 when I got one bad sunburn about sun damage, right?
Uh-huh.
So, like, my haircut is my hat. Like, when I started to lose my hair in the back,
Yeah.
I don't give a shit, uh, because it's a hat. And keeping the sun off my body is, like, really important to me, and I
Same.
totally notice when I do really good at that, and when I don't, when I'm working out in the garden, and usually I'm very good. I'd say, like, 90%, 95% of the time, I'm wearing the hat, full sleeves, and they're all, like, very breathable clothing that's UPF 50 and all that stuff, and you feel hotter in the moment because you have more layers on, but you recover so much faster because you
Mhm.
didn't burn your skin and fry yourself.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I too am very white, and it's the same thing, like, when I was young, high school, I did go tanning and stuff, and then I read some really terrifying article about how, like, every time there's, like, a big exposure of sun to your skin, or not even sun, of UV rays to your skin, there's, like, an increase of by, like, it's like 75 times for your skin cancer likelihood, and I was
Mm,
like, "Okay, that's not worth it." So I don't like I do wear, like, tank tops and shorts and stuff when I'm out because it's hot, but I lather up in sunscreen. And it's the kind of thing, like, yeah, I recognize, like, I am not someone who's ever gonna have a bomb ass tan again. But I'm not, but it's like, but the risk isn't worth it. It's just like, at a certain point, it's vanity, my own vanity over my health, like, I don't wanna any risk that I can minimize when fear of death over here,
mhm.
so, like, if I can minimize my risk of cancer, I'm gonna do that. And I'm allergic to the sun. I don't know if I ever mentioned that before,
That's kind of
but
important.
I'm allergic to the sun. So it's like I have to minimize that sun exposure, and, like, I do go outside. I like to be outside. That's important for me. So it's not at the cost of not going outside. I can't do that. That's a compromise I can't make. But
Mhm,
wearing less and less of sunscreen and reapplying religiously is how I make that work for me, you know?
yeah. And what you're talking about, bring back this point is like, um, you mentioned like health, like you don't look healthy because you have a suntan. That is completely a
I didn't say healthy. I said my vanity versus my health.
okay, vanity,
I said I don't have a, what did I say? Something like
low.
a bomb ass tan or something. Like,
Okay, and we think that's appealing. Tan is sun damage. You're cooked, you're burned, it's damage to your physical form, and that's appealing, and that is a Western thing. You
Mhm.
know, in Eastern cultures, they pale, man, all the way. And we could wrap all this in the race too, and that's probably where we
Sure,
don't want
yeah.
to go right now. But um, that's just completely made up social construct. Yeah,
Mhm. No, yeah, I mean, it's like anything too, everything ebbs and flows. There's, like,
yeah,
cycles to this shit where, like, everybody wants to be tan and hot and, literally and and figuratively, I guess. But, like and then there's the rejection of that and whatever, and, I mean, there are still, like, you can get a spray tan and not
people
have
do.
sun exposure. Yeah, people do, and you can not have sun exposure. I mean, that's okay, that's a balance, I guess, like, if that I get it. It's hard to not care about your physical appearance in society.
Yeah, yeah. It's
It's hard
you.
not to.
No, because it's tied up to everything from simply mating success to financial success. What do you just get over it? No, man.
Yeah.
People taller people that look appealing, that are good looking and in shape,
Mhm.
like it's tied directly to financial success and business success and everything. And you
Social
tell people to
success,
just
people
get
are more
over it.
receptive to you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
People
Yeah.
are nicer to you.
Yeah.
And pretty privilege. Pretty privilege is an actual
Sure.
term, and it's like, that's real.
That
That
is real.
element is real. And to tell people to not care about stuff like that, a lot easier said than done because we all see how that's received differently,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
But you can, like you actually said this, you can actually use some of these like traits to your advantage as well. Like,
Sure.
I use my vanity to propel me to go into the gym.
Mhm.
And, if that goes one end of the spectrum, that can be really bad, body dysmorphia, right? And
Sure.
you can
Yeah.
really ruin your life. Anorexia kills.
Yeah.
And like there's
Mhm.
lots of bodybuilders who are taking massive amounts of steroids and still think they look weak because they have a disconnect from what they actually look like and feel.
Yeah.
But if a little bit of like, yeah, dude, I look good, gets you in the gym and lifting weights regularly, and you get better health results overall from that, I don't see the sin in that.
Yeah, I did. It's like God, it's like everything we talk about balance, right? Like
Mhm,
everything in moderation, I guess, because like vanity does things to propel us, and there is a benefit to it. Like and I'm not gonna pretend that I don't have my own vanity sources. Of course I do. I'm human, of course. But like, yeah, I think the difference is like letting it propel us forward in these ways that are useful and effective, and not being careful of how easily and quickly that can edge into something really unhealthy or maladaptive for us, getting obsessed with something or engaging in really unhealthy behaviors to achieve something like it's a really fine line and it's a slippery slope and we have to be aware of that. This is just another call to action for ourselves. We talk about this all the time, but
mhm.
stop and evaluate and like recognize there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong because it's just natural to have that vanity in this society in some extent, and everybody has a different percentage of that. But like, know where your vanity is and what it extends to, and be evaluating for yourself, is this healthy? Because you know things like eating habits, healthy eating habits, sometimes that's vanity related, sometimes that's health related,
Mhm.
sometimes it's both.
Yeah.
But like, that's a great thing. But when you take that to the extreme, or when you get really rigid around what you're taking in some way, like, that is where it starts to edge into potentially maladaptive or unhealthy behaviors and tendencies, right?
Yeah. I have a friend who wanted to eat perfectly and he had had some stomach issues.
Mhm.
So he actually reduced his entire diet to powders, different types of powders from like protein powder to
Oh,
carbs and
wow.
sugars and everything. And he's like, I'm getting exactly the nutrients I need, right? And he was all messed up at the same time. He was literally eating
Yeah.
powders, like he wasn't getting his
Yep.
greens, he wasn't getting his fiber and all that. And he had taken that to an extreme, um, end of the spectrum, and it did not serve him. But
Yeah.
like in this, the level of complexity that we live in, and these counter countervailing requirements, we have to like sit and stop and like assess again and again and again, and we have to figure out basic self-care practices that work
Yep.
across our life experience and to get better results.
Totally. And we have to be thinking about individualized, like what's
Yes,
best for
yeah,
us.
yeah,
Cause
yeah.
I know like there's huge differences in that. Me and Anthony one time were trying to do like a cleanse, a healthy concept. We're juicing. We're like taking vegetables and fruits and juicing. And it was just like 2 days we were trying to do it, 2 or 3 days or something.
Sure.
Um, and just to reset our bodies. I was fine.
Hmm.
I have a very sedentary job. Anthony has a very physical job. He almost passed out
Huh.
at work. And it was like he wasn't getting enough nutrients and enough calories for the amount of
Yeah,
energy that he expends. And that's something that we have to take into consideration. Like we try to eat similar kinds of foods, not 100%, because there are certain things. Carbs hurt me.
right.
Carbs fuel him. He needs them,
Yeah,
but, and like portion sizes, like I don't have to have a ton of food when I'm eating because like I'm just keeping a body alive. I mean, I do exercise and I'm active, but not the way he is, not for
right.
8+ hours a day. He has to eat bigger portions to fuel him longer
Yeah,
and through those things. And that's an important thing because I think especially like in diet culture and stuff, we see this where it's like this, you know, eat at this deficit, this many calories, and it's kind of across the board. But like you got to think about how many calories you burn in a day too. Like
yeah,
that's a huge difference for a lot of people.
absolutely. Yeah, the amount of calories he needs is much greater than what you need. And it's
Totally.
not just this same amount of proportions he needs because he's working so hard and so physically and breaking down his body because of that. He needs a lot more protein so that he
Yeah.
can build that back and support that level of labor.
Yep.
And he needs
Protein and carbs for him are great because carbs are energy for him because he
exactly.
has the energy is getting used to the carbs. For me, the carbs just sit heavy and they hurt me.
Well, yeah,
They
and then
make
you
me
it
feel
makes your
sick.
stomach, and then you feel sluggish
Yeah.
and brain foggy.
Yeah.
But he'll
Yep.
he'll convert that to sugar in
Yeah.
a healthy way, and
Yeah.
that'll power him while the protein is, supporting his muscle and his structure and all that stuff.
Yeah, it gets used in his system where it
Yeah,
doesn't really get used in
yeah,
mine, and I'm not even someone who's like, "Oh, I don't touch carbs." I do, but I have to be particular about how much I'm eating because 'cause it'll make me feel sick, and how
yeah,
often I'm eating. I have to be more intentional. I eat a lot more protein and greens than I do carbs, but for
yeah,
him, there's a difference in that, and I think that's all I'm speaking to with this is that there are
yeah,
individual differences to take into
sure.
account, right? And the same thing with, like, you know, exercise.
Mhm,
Different needs to different individual needs for that and
yeah.
different capabilities, physical capabilities that our bodies are going to have.
Yeah, and, if you've got something going on, and a certain individual has something going on where they're like, their health is compromised in a certain way,
Yeah.
and they have to support that with a lifestyle and habits that aren't ideal, not even ideal for them.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, Forget about being, ideal for a normal, quote unquote, normal person, but
Hmm.
they need that to support their life that they are living because whether they're injured or whatever's going on in their life, they that's what it requires.
Hmm.
So it's like you can be in circumstances where this isn't ideal health, but this is what
Yeah.
I can do, and this will support me now. And you,
Hmm.
and if that's what you're doing, and you're thoughtful and you're trying to optimize as best you can for you and with what you have, there shouldn't be any shame around that either.
Yeah. I know someone who, without trying, and in a time where they were actually unable to engage in movement a lot because they just had a procedure done, they lost 15 pounds in
Mhm.
a matter of like 2 months without trying, eating normally and stuff. And then now they're just trying to like bulk back up because they don't have 15 pounds to lose.
Yeah.
And so, like, at this point, they're just trying to load themselves up with, like, carb heavy stuff, sugar heavy stuff with their normal meals, but, like, they're like, "I just need to be able to gain weight.
Mhm.
I have to, like, this is not healthy, right? Like, I can't
Mm-mm.
afford to lose any more weight. I really need to get up to a healthy weight." So there's, like, that's the paradox of that, like, this is a person who was eating healthy, but just because of their own biology, lost a lot of weight, and, um they gotta get it back up.
They
So,
may
like, this is not
they may need to gorge a little bit.
exactly,
Like,
and that's, like, counterintuitive to a lot of
yeah.
us, right?
Yeah.
You don't wanna eat 8,000 calories in a day,
Mhm.
like, holy shit,
Yeah.
but this person's like, "I gotta gain weight,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, "My metabolism is fucking going."
When I was through hiking, and hiking 25 miles a day roughly for 5 months,
Mhm.
minimum 8,000 calories, and I was still losing weight.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the, like, calculator thing once when me and Anthony were trying to we've been just recalibrating how we eat and our nutrition and stuff, and it's always like a learning curve. But we were calculating his the one time, and it was saying to just maintain, he needs to take in 5,000 calories a day,
I believe it.
which is way more than me,
Yeah.
like,
It's something just popped in my mind, but I think at some point Michael Phelps, famous American gold Olympian swimmer, he had to do
mhm,
like 10,000 calories a day to like train, you know? Obviously
yeah,
elite of elite athletes.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, just burning it all. Swimming's
Well, and you have to think of
extreme.
how much of his day
Oh,
and, like, that high level of physical activity, like, how much of his day is spent around training, and, like, that guy is just burning
yeah,
calories, Yeah, you gotta be
yeah,
putting that back in.
yeah. And well, he's shooting for Olympic gold medals and millions of dollars in sponsorships. Uh, he's living an extreme life.
Mhm.
And the food he was supporting it with that. God, that must sounds tiring. That's one thing I remember when I was doing that is like it's a lot of work to eat that much food.
Yeah, and like, to build that into your schedule
It's
too, and
it's
when you're
tough.
moving like that,
Yeah.
I know for me, and maybe this isn't true for everybody, but for me, eating right before I'm trying to, like, do any kind of physical activity makes me feel like shit.
Mhm.
I need to have, like, a period of digestion between to let that settle. So it's really hard, like, if you're highly physical, that's really hard to, like, build in. Where are you eating? Like, even if you're snacking 10 times throughout the day, but if you're trying to get in 10,000 calories, you're eating 1,000 calories at a time, like, 10 times a day. That's
That
a lot.
I mean, being able to do that is part of what makes him him, you know? His
Sure.
metabolism allows for that level of like intake and
Yeah.
absorption. I remember hearing from a guy who's a long distance, reading about a guy who's long distance swimmer, like swam across the English Channel. I think he swam around like England or something crazy like that. And he's
Yeah.
like, my superpower is I can eat while horizontal. And he's like, most people can't do that. So he can eat.
Like, he eats while he's swimming?
Yeah. And he'll like, part of one of the things that this guy's super extreme. He was eat piping hot oatmeal. And he was like, part of the reason I do that is I'm in cold water. So hot oatmeal inside me would help me keep my core warm. And I'm like, that just sounds like hell.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, you couldn't make me
Uh,
do that, but he would do that. So
yeah.
the variety of human experience really plays into like what is your healthiest choices.
That calls for a lot of attunement to self, too.
Yeah.
You gotta know a lot about what, like I just said, right? For me, I cannot eat right
Yeah.
before, even if I'm gonna just go out and disc golf, like that's like some hiking and moving, or if I'm exercising, I can't eat right before that. I have to plan, I have to strategize where I'm eating to make sure that I can do that. But like that's me.
Mm, me
Different
too.
people, like, you gotta know your body and your system and what works and what doesn't work. That's important.
Yeah. I do the same thing. I like to wait half an hour. you
Mhm.
know? Eat half an hour to metabolize and then hit the gym.
Yeah. Half hour wouldn't be enough time for me.
Yeah.
My metabolism doesn't work that well. So it has to be spread out more, but like it's planning. It involves planning.
Yeah. Oh, you have to learn that about yourself. And usually you have to learn that about yourself by screwing up.
Yeah. Oh
Screwing up
yeah.
by tasting the repercussions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because it's a fine balance too, right?
Yeah.
Because like if I don't eat before I do physical activity, I'm fucking exhausted
Yeah.
at the end of it. I don't have the energy to like push me through.
Yes.
And if I eat too close to doing it, I feel like I'm gonna puke. And I have a very quick reaction to vomiting, and it
Mhm.
happens easily.
Mhm.
So it's just like, yeah, there's a fine balance to all of that.
Yeah.
But paying attention to ourselves and trial and error, a lot of trial and error. Find what works for you, you know?
And noticing things that change over time, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I can't lift weights and hike every day. I need more time to recover because I've gotten a little bit
Yeah.
older. And like, if I don't do that and just like, "Oh, I'm not getting older, I can just tough this out," I'll actually run myself into the ground much, much faster. And then I won't be able to do the
Yep.
things that I want to do.
Yeah.
So if I give myself a little bit more time, a little bit more rest, I'm actually able to be more active.
Yeah, that's a key point in all of this too, because it is going to change across the lifetime. We talked about this in previous episodes, like the natural decline that happens, some atrophy stuff that happens. You got to pay attention to it. You got to be real with yourself about it,
Yeah.
because if you try to delude yourself into like this isn't happening, or you don't want to believe that this is changing and you have
Mhm.
different needs now, or you need rest more, you're going to burn yourself out and physically burn yourself out to where you're going to lose the ability to do any of that stuff versus having to just cut it down, and that's a decision that we have to make for ourselves, but taking stock of that, because sometimes people don't recognize it until they're at that point of it's too late,
Yeah.
and now I've lost the ability to engage in the things that really matter. So
Yeah.
this is another one of those introspection points where we always just say existentialism, paying attention, stopping, pausing, taking stock of what's going on, evaluating what's meaningful, looking at patterns and trends for yourself. And like, yeah, if you're noticing that the things you do, the way that you engage in physical activity is more draining than it was 10 years ago, that's real.
Yeah. It's very real.
And figure out how to fine tune that so you don't lose that ability to engage in that, because that's probably a core part of your personality if you were doing that 10 years ago and still doing it.
Yeah.
But if you want to keep it 10 years from now, you got to modify.
Yeah. And recognize, I think that like there is no body mind uh division. Like your
Yeah,
mental wellness and your physical wellness are so close that they're the same, and they're
they're
so
the same.
dependent on one another. And you will feel it. You will feel it psychologically. Um, so listen to your body, but listen to your mind as well, and then and try and
Mhm.
achieve your own healthy status quo.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Self care, people.
self care. It's always comes back to
It's
self,
we sound like parrots and we know it, but it's important, and that's why we stress it.
but it's also because like we had to fight to get to learn this too, you know,
Yeah.
and it just
Mhm.
works. You take good care
Yep.
of yourself, you get better results out of life.
Yep. And you said this part before, but if anybody is just like watching this as a one-off episode or whatever, like self-care is not something that, even as mental health professionals who've practiced this for years at this point, we still don't do it 100% of the time perfectly. It's one of those things that like you just strive towards, you're aware of, you're working your best, you recognize there are moments where it's going to drop down to doing 50%
Yeah,
and then back up to 80. You know what I mean? Like it's going to
yeah,
ebb and flow, but just being aware of it and trying to always be conscious of bringing it in where you can. There's obvious ebb and flows to everything in life, and self-care is included in that.
yeah, and that's how you'll actually end up being consistent, and then that's the
Mhm.
goal. It's the
Yep.
consistency, but not through perfection, through
Yep.
practice.
Exactly.
Okay,
Cool.
let's land this pig. Um,
Yes.
you know,
I have not
it's
heard
like a
that before.
military phrase, or something about from the Air Force. Well,
Okay.
thank you all for being here on the Death and All the Rest podcast. I'm Chris. She's Bree.
That's right.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.